welcome to the June meeting of the Southampton Village Planning Commission. Not a long agenda tonight, sort of follow up on some of the things we've been working on. First of all, we talked last time about the trustees had passed the gross floor area that we recommended, with the exception of leaving out, or keeping the current zoning, I should say, for the area around Hillcrest Avenue, Hillcrest Terrace, Woodward Lane, which is the R75 district north of the Long Island Railroad. We had a community meeting right before the last planning commission meeting, which Mark, you were at, right?
Right.
Laura, were you at the meeting? Yeah, Laura was there, Mark was there, somebody else was there. You weren't there, right?
Yeah, Kimberly was there.
Yeah, and then...
And there were some trustees.
And the trustees and mayor came. It was a very good meeting, I thought. There's a very open dialogue. As a result, we've been asked to commission a study to look to, which would both look at existing conditions and make recommendations. Just want to, we've asked Glynis Berry to put together an outline. We may also go to another firm to get some, some options. But I just wanted to mention sort of what she had put together as a potential program, and get any comments. First was to conduct field surveys, identify contextual proportions, and focus on sample lots typical of the neighborhood. So we have some data which is based on what information is available at the building department and what information is available from the town GIS. Given the nature of the neighborhood, I think there's a good deal of concern that that data may not be completely accurate.
Especially from the town.
Right, particularly from the town. Many of those houses were not formally filed in the first case. So I think one of the things that came up at the community meeting we had is doing a house-by-house survey to make sure we get accurate information
Is there
at this
a
point.
plot map of that?
There is.
Something that's readable? I know that
Yeah.
there was something tiny, but it would be
Yeah, the
interesting to
building
see how
department had
it
a
was.
larger version. I'll send it, I guess sending around is not going to help it. I'll find a way to get copies and get it to everyone. There is a
Okay.
version that's about this size, so you can actually read it.
Good.
Again,
I think it would be helpful for them too.
know what we have from them. Even the building department said they were not completely confident that in every case it was accurate.
Yeah.
So it's really an area that I think it would be great for that area to get now an accurate, almost like a survey in some way.
But which area are we talking about? How are you going to delineate?
It is delineated in the zoning
Yeah.
text, so it is the R75 district north of the Long Island Railroad, which is
Okay.
Hillcrest Avenue, Hillcrest Terrace, and Winwood Lane.
And Miller Place?
And Miller Place, I apologize. Yeah. So it's that entire area.
The entire area from the railroad all the way to the village boundary.
That's
Right, that
the-
in the R75. Dale Street, interestingly, is not R75, which surprised me. It's R12.5 for some reason, even though the houses are as
Because it
small.
was originally plotted as that.
Right, yeah, exactly. So that's the area that's called out, and which still has basically the former gross floor area in effect. And so the first is to do a real survey. Second is prepare visual material statistics, including street elevations using both photography and 3D graphic diagrams to convey existing conditions and their relationships to regulations. So two things. One is sort of a Google Map type approach is actually photograph all the street fronts. Again, to try to get more information out there. And then second of all, it is an analysis of how the houses do or do not currently meet regulations. The concern at the meeting was about what happens if they try to modify. And one of the answers that came up, I guess, at some of the public hearings was, well, these houses have other problems, they don't comply currently, but we want to see the extent to which that's the case. So is this just a problem of, if someone wants to rebuild, or is this actually a case of, even today, they're non-conforming, which probably many of them are, but we're not sure. Then we talk about holding up to 3 or 4-hour meetings with focus groups, sort of the workshop approach we used before. That will share an analysis of existing conditions, prompt reaction to a visual survey, and discuss the implication of codes or changes in concept. And then look at the impact of changes in code and show a few examples of what would happen. So, one of the things I think that's going to make this zoning have to be fairly sophisticated is, on the one hand, there's a lot of concern that people want to make sure they can build if they want to build, and that should be a concern. At the same time, those concerns stated at the meeting that people don't want to have the existing sort of character of the neighborhood totally change. So that's a difficult and careful balance, because they like the fact that it's more small scale, that one thing that struck me, that night was, in a way, and it's not the right term, I can't think of the right term, but there's a lot of open space in that neighborhood, because the houses are fairly small and the lots are fairly open. There's a feeling in that neighborhood of there's a fairly pleasant feeling of a sort of openness that you don't get in a lot of the villages. I mean, most of the village now is fenced and hedged, and it's really changed.
Right.
That neighborhood almost feels like the village used to feel. I mean, like, you can look down the street and see all those, there's something about the character that I think people like.
It's a uniqueness.
There's a uniqueness to that area, right? I mean, it really is different. And some of it is not. Right, it feels more of a neighborhood. And I think partially it's also because more people live there full time, obviously, at this point. And then digest focus group feedback and draft findings, recommendations for change. Have the options come back here after they're presented at a community meeting, and then prepare a final report for recommendations for any changes to code based on conditions and feedback. I think one thing we learned from the very initial study that was done is, gross floor area, of course, will be an issue, but there are other issues that are probably going to be equally important. The most obvious one being,
Health department?
sorry?
Health department?
Well, two, I guess. You're right. One is the health department, and so that's been one thing that clearly has constrained anything happening there. And then secondly, the side yard setback conditions. We think, and that's one of the reasons why we want to do a field survey first. None of them would be able to meet the new side setback. That's not a rational spot to be in. You don't want a zoning that no one can meet. So that's going to clearly be one of the major things that's going to have to be reviewed for that area, is coming up with something that makes more sense from a side yard setback point of view. Because to the extent we're really at a minimum of 15 feet now.
And front, too.
And front. Well, it's also front the same thing. Many of the lots are actually too small to ever meet it. So it may not be as gross floor area focused, but there's going to be a number of factors that come into play.
Number of factors.
Right. One thing that I thought of that night when we were there was there's very few garages in that neighborhood now. When garages are built, that's going to change the context. And again, given the layout of a lot of those sites, that's going to be hard to do. So, anything you think we're missing? Obviously, I guess one thing we are missing here, you're right, is really looking how the health department is currently impacting.
It'd be great to get a grant for that neighborhood from the
Right.
county to do
Right.
a sort of field thing for the
Right.
sewer, or the pod system.
Actually, a really great idea to do that as almost a pilot.
Absolutely.
It's a really great idea.
And it would be.
Why is there a problem with the health department there? Because the lots are too small, or?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It would
then-
be so good, because
Yeah.
then the community would be so happy about
Right.
that. And that would be a little feather for us. And
Right. It also make, if someone wanted to build, it would make it easier because
Yeah.
that condition
So
had
how do
been.
we do that?
It's a good question. I don't know, but it's a really good idea.
It's a great idea.
Try to make it like a communities.
Yeah, like a pilot program for
Right.
that development.
Right, go to the county and say, let's use this as a, one thing I was thinking of last time, at the last meeting, we had a conference.
Yeah, but it's not, you see, where you want to put sewers is where you want to have more development. There, the development is limited, the size of the house is limited. So there is really no that much of an incentive to create.
But we are expecting there is going to be development.
There will
And
be.
the water wells, the wells for Suffolk County Water are right there, just
Yeah.
on south of the railroad track.
Yeah, so that would just be so cool.
And west.
Yeah,
The other interesting thing about it, I think, is,
for the wells, yes.
I was thinking last time, we had this whole conversation about affordable housing, and what's one of the interesting factors here is this is one of the last available affordable housing in the village, or if not the last affordable housing in the village,
Right.
And so, but on the other hand, it's very hard for anyone to invest because, for example, you don't meet health department regulations, you don't meet other regulations, and almost you could posit solving the health department regulations as helping to keep that as affordable housing,
Right.
right?
And that would go a long way in getting the grant for the pilot sewer.
Right. It's a really interesting idea, actually.
Yeah, that's a good
Yeah,
idea.
yeah. Public comment? Yeah.
Why is there, I never heard of a health department problem there. If you have a single and separate lot, you get health department no matter what size the lot is. That's not true. Most of those lots are built on anyway, so you can't be denied a health
But
department.
if you expand the house,
You can still
or you
do
want to put a pool, or you want to put something, then,
Or more
it.
bathrooms.
You're entitled to it. That's the law. I mean, there's no such thing as, if you have a single and
I guess it
separate
has to
lot,
be clarified.
you are allowed a cesspool system. That's
you're
the law.
allowed, yes, you're allowed the system, but if you want to expand, if you want
You're
to
allowed
put
to expand.
a pool,
Put a bigger rank.
You're allowed to. You're allowed to go deeper. If you don't have enough area to build two
Right.
pools, you're allowed to go down
yes.
24 feet.
So why don't we do the following? It's not worth arguing about. The facts will be the facts.
That is
Why don't
the
we have
fact. I
that?
do it for a living. I got a health
No,
department
he's
license.
right, he's right, there usually no, there are solutions
Right, there are solutions.
for the
Right,
existing lots, there's no question about it.
could be expensive solution.
It
right,
can be
right.
expensive solution, but the idea maybe to combine it
Right.
with the affordable housing,
Right,
if we were then to allow additional
Yeah.
density.
It's worth studying and looking at.
right, right.
Because then you maybe like do 3-family homes.
Right.
Then at that point,
Right,
yes.
right.
Make an area where you're allowing.
Right,
Well, and taking the burden off of the homeowner.
right, yeah.
I just have a question. Why do you want to go into that area? I mean, those people have lived there a long time, and I don't think anybody's ever come to one of the town or the village board meetings and said, hey, I don't like my neighborhood, I want it changed. I think that's something that's being manufactured. I mean,
Well,
obviously there's a lot of minorities that live there, and they've never complained, and they've been in this neighborhood, they've been here forever, and that's a good place for people to live if they can't afford to live here, and it's
Well,
always been. And-
Michael, when we had this committee meeting with the community, there were people there that lived there that were talking about the new zoning regulations and what if they wanted to modify their houses and what if they wanted to sell their houses or what if they wanted to have an in-law apartment or something. So these people, well, they may not be well represented at the regular meetings. Bonnie Cannon, I will point out, was a trustee, and she lives there. And Curtis Highsmith also lives there, and he's the chair of the ARB.
He doesn't live there.
So, he doesn't live there?
No, no,
Okay,
he
well,
used to.
anyway,
No, he's-
he did at one time.
Yeah, yep,
Anyway, the community itself
Right.
has expressed interest
yeah.
in becoming a part of modification if they want to.
Yeah, I would
So-
say, yeah,
So this is not, we're not pulling this out of our
right.
hat.
I would say two things. Number one,
understand,
three
but
things,
the same
Michael,
thing
sorry.
goes
Let
on for
me,
Pelletreau Street, Pulaski Street.
We looked at those.
All the other streets have the same issue.
Yeah.
People want to put apartments, people want to expand their houses, and now they can't
the
do
Well,
it.
we
the
looked at
conditions
that.
are different. We did just, maybe you missed some of the meetings, but we were, this did come up actually from them, from Bob Bonney and others. Came to the public hearings and said, we're very worried about this new GFA and we're worried about the new zoning and we want you to look at it. So they asked us to look at it. the mayor and trustees then asked us to do a sort of initial analysis. We did an initial analysis, I'm happy to send it to you, which looked at Palato Street and Pulaski and a few other streets, and also looked at this area. This area does have is unique in terms of the size of the lot. There are, I think, 3 or 4 non-standard lots in the other R75 districts. 50% of the lots in this area we're talking about are non-standard. So
And
it really is different.
They were developed as a piece. I mean,
Right.
it was developed as a
Right.
piece.
Right,
It was not Pelletier and Pulaski, but this one was
right.
platted and developed as a piece. In the 20s, I think, wasn't it?
30s.
There's a lot of very large, wider lots in that area too.
Not a lot, some, but not a
There are
lot.
some.
I mean, I'll get you the study. We have this.
What about
It's kind
Halsey
of
Avenue?
spot zoning people because you either do everybody or do nothing, and that's the way zoning works. That's not fair.
No, that's not true.
You have a lot of people now going into the building department that are trying to buy houses and sell houses, and they're not doing it now.
But look, we have a history in this village of what's called overlays, where the village has picked an area like the north side of Meadow Lane as an example, and has created special zoning for that area because it has conditions that are unique. That's something that's happened in this village for probably 50 years.
I understand that. but
And
you
what we're
just-
talking about here is similar. You have unique conditions in that neighborhood. And just to give full justice to this, one of the things I think we and the mayor and trustees heard at this meeting is people were appreciative that this was happening because they feel in the past their issues had not been studied. It's actually the opposite of what you said. The feeling was, where have you been the last 30 years? Like, it's not, seriously, that's literally what they said. Like, we keep hearing people talk about us, but no one ever comes here and actually asks us.
Well,
So-
and that is an issue, that they
Right.
don't come to us.
Right.
But
Okay, well, the
basically,
problem
we go
is-
to them.
The problem is, what you want to do is you want to change that area.
No,
No, we don't.
Of course you do.
we want
No,
to
we
give
don't.
people the options that everybody else in the
We don't
village
change
has.
anything, Michael.
It's all we're
We
looking to
change
do.
nothing.
But you took away everybody else's options, and
No, we
there's a
didn't.
lot of very upset people. I mean, I deal with people all the time that want to sell their lots, and they're very upset. I tell them, you can't build a house that anybody would ever want to buy, and they
Why
get
would
very
you say
upset.
such a horrible thing?
Because you can't build
You can't build
bedrooms.
a huge
No, you
thing?
can't build on a third of an acre, or say 12,000 square feet. You can't build more than 2 bedrooms on the second floor now, all right? So what are you going to build? You're going to build a
You're
bedroom?
gonna build a basement with 3
It's funny,
bedrooms.
Michael, because we were just in the building department today reviewing what a third of an acre could have. And I recall
Right.
3 or 4 bedrooms, a living room, a dining room, a media room, a foyer, a den, not even including the basement, which had a media room, a wine room, a gym, a bedroom, a bathroom, and a laundry facility.
Well, forget the basement.
So I
Three-
think
No,
there's
you
a lot
don't
of-
forget the
You just
basement.
said, hit the nail on the head, a 3 or 4 bedroom house. Nobody wants a 3-bedroom house.
No, that's 4 bedrooms in the
When you
second
say,
floor.
when you say,
Can't do it, and my house goes to the old.
Michael, look, you're obviously entitled to your views. I do not
I
agree.
do it every day.
90% of America buys
my house
3 and
to
4
see
bedroom
it when I
houses.
was building it, of how many square feet and how you fit more bedrooms. Please show me, because it doesn't work anymore.
We're not showing you. I mean, to be very honest, where we are today is the gross floor area was passed. You have a perfect right to protest, say you made a mistake, vote against whoever you want to vote for, do whatever you want to do. But that's now law. It's not our job to go backwards. Maybe it should be, but it's not. Our job, we haven't been asked by the trustees to look at gross floor area again. We've been asked by the trustees to look at this
But these
particular
are
neighborhood.
problems. No, I went to
What
the
we
trustee
said
meeting.
at
I
the
was only
last,
one there.
no, what we said at the last meeting.
Come on. I mean,
Michael, take this
Michael.
up with the mayor and
Right.
myself.
We've been asked.
Because we've asked the planning commission to continue
Right.
on in
Yeah.
their
what are you doing this for? You're
Michael.
hurting,
What we're doing.
you're hurting people
Well,
that are regular
Michael, in
people in
fairness-
this village,
Michael,
and they don't
would
know
you be-
what you're
Michael,
doing.
in fairness
Would
to
you
what
be
we said,
willing
sorry.
to just take this offline with the mayor and the other
No,
trustees?
I mean, I can't get I've applied for different boards. They won't put me on because I have a big mouth and I'm not a puppet. So they won't put me on any boards. I've been doing this for 30 years, and you jam this down everybody's
But this
throat,
isn't
and
the
nobody
audience.
knows what's going on in the village. Nobody.
Michael, so what we said at the last meeting of the trustees, I believe, was, which point you've made several times, there's been a lot of zoning changes made over the last few years. We thought it was time to take a pause, see how that plays out. Look, it may be in a year that we come back and say, you know, if you're right, gee, people have stopped building in the village, they can't create houses here, we need to do something. Or it may be in a year we come back and say, you know what, this is just like East Hampton Village, which has stricter zoning laws than us. You know, all these people said the sky was about to fall, and people, I could take it East Hampton today, I was there 7 days ago, and people were building all over the village, even though their zoning law is more restrictive than ours. Somehow, in some magical way, people found a way to build houses. So we'll find out. And our job, once we find out, once the building department's been, you know, incredibly helpful about this, you know, if they come back in a year and say, look, we're working with people and we can't figure out a way to build reasonable houses, then obviously we have to address it.
Well,
I
permits
just
are
add
down
that, you know, Michael,
50%, and sales are down 40%. So you tell me if it's
I
working.
don't believe those
You don't think
statistics, and
so?
I follow the statistics
Yeah, I do
fairly
too.
closely.
I do too.
Well-
They're down drastically.
They're down throughout the Hamptons, but if you compare the pattern in Southampton Village to most other villages in the last year, we're actually higher than all the other villages the last year. Well, that's the statistics I
Not
read.
higher than Sag Harbor. You're
Yes,
not-
we are.
No.
Yes, we are.
but we welcome your comments. I mean, your input and your comments are very well, you know, we appreciate you coming and voicing your
Right.
concerns, and we certainly take them into account.
Look, and there are, you know, I think, as you know, the commission has many different views, and I mean, it's been difficult for us because we understand these issues, and many of us are, you know, close enough to the industry that, you know, it's not, I don't see it as our mission to stop people from building houses, for sure. I don't see it the opposite way, but I do also believe, which you don't agree with, but I feel very strongly, and I think history will tell us, that in fact, if we don't keep the unique character of this village, that in the long run, there will be a tremendous impact on property value here. I think part of the reason people buy here is because we do have this wonderful, unique character, and our job in the Planning Commission is to make sure that, and it's in our code, it's actually part of why we exist, is to make sure that that character gets preserved. And so it's always a balance for us.
But that's not true, because the biggest jump of house values have been, and before you did the zoning, for 10 years it went up. You used to be able to buy a house, a tear down, for $300,000. Now they're over $1 million.
That happened
So that
throughout the
hasn't
Hamptons.
Just market.
That happened throughout the East End,
No,
in
it
case you didn't
hasn't.
notice.
No, it hasn't. That hasn't happened north of the highway.
Yes, it did.
Well, and I really need to reiterate that, you know, we don't do this independently.
Oh, I know that.
You know, we are asked to study something by the trustees, by the mayor, and we do due diligence and do that, and we make a recommendation. And it's really up to the powers that have the power
No, I understand.
to either take those and implement them or not. So,
I really think the real pressing issue in this village is the downtown. It's going to be a ghost town, and it's a ghost town in the winter, and it's going to get worse. You know, you have like you were absolutely right when you were doing the sewer study. You don't have wet uses, and that's the only thing in retail that you possibly have a shot at.
Yeah.
And it's going to get worse and worse, and I think that's where somebody should be going after CPF money. Somebody should be making a new master plan for the downtown with sewers and everything, and maybe some kind of affordable housing.
Yeah.
I don't think the major problem is Hill Street, behind McDonald's. I think, you know, that's, people live there, they're happy, they're fine, and I think anything you try to do to improve over there, you're going to raise the values and you're going to push people out.
I think the two are unconnected from each other. We're doing a study, which we've been asked to do, and which the neighborhood asked us to do, despite what you said. And we're going to do that, and the neighborhood will look at it, and they may say, you know what, we don't want to touch anything. I think that is possible. Or they may say, gee, this is going to help us. So just as an example, right now, we think, and we're not certain, but we think most people would not be able to build a new house, because, if nothing else, because of the way that the side setbacks work. That's something we should fix. If that really is the case, right, I think it's our job to fix it.
But you have a ZBA, that's,
I don't think it's fair to say to an entire neighborhood, you can't do anything unless you go to the ZBA. And they were very vocal at the meeting that they didn't want to be in that spot.
well, you just
So-
did that to the entire village.
No, we
A
didn't.
third of an acre.
No,
If
we
you want to do it, you got to go to this.
We don't agree, but let's just leave it at that.
But I think for the
But
downtown
just-
area,
yeah.
for the downtown area, we will make a recommendations to the trustees
Right.
to issue an RFP, request for proposal and request for applications, to get
Yeah,
proposals.
yeah, so I'm glad
for-
you opened up that issue, thank you.
To
Yeah,
to get proposals to design
yes,
those advanced septic systems or centralized, or multiple,
Right.
maybe 5 centralized.
Didn't we do this already?
well, no, we've looked at it, so let me actually pick up on what.
Didn't we do this
No, no, no,
already?
let's pick up on what Mark said, because I think it's something I want to
I
talk
thought we
about
did
today.
that.
So, several years ago, we had a sewer study, study done of a sewer
3 or
plant.
4 years
So let me actually go back in time a lot. So, when the sewer was first discussed many years ago, probably 10, 12 years ago, one of the issues that came up, and they were basically the same issue, was concern by a lot of people in the village that just creating a sewer without doing the zoning in the village center would open up, enormous redevelopment, and people were very worried about that. At the same time, the county basically said, you should not be doing a sewer until you have zoning, because you really haven't, you can't justify why you're doing it, because you don't really know how much redevelopment has. So we did, I guess only Eduardo and I were on the commission at the time, we did this, probably the most comprehensive study we've ever done, came up with new zoning for the village center, came up with the design guidelines for the village center, and that created sort of how much redevelopment would be possible in the village center. And one of the things identified was the concern, as Michael White in the audience said, about the long-term viability of the village as a center, unless it had 3 things. One is the wet uses that would keep the village active in the off-season. The second was affordable housing, so that more people were living in the village center, as those villages in the East End that have stayed viable actually have housing very close. And third was providing opportunities for smaller local shops, because the national retail market tends to be, at this point, both is having trouble, but also the national retail market has lost interest in the East End as a year-round destination. It's really looking at it as a summer, because these stores are about marketing more than anything else. So all 3 things were things that needed to happen. So when we then had commission, I guess, what was the firm?
H2M.
H2M, yes.
H2M.
To look at the sewer district, what happened is they were able to justify it from a usage point of view, but the capital cost of a centralized sewer system was very high, and we got extraordinarily strong, I would say, vocal and almost universal feedback that it was too expensive, and the mayor and trustees at the time decided to put it on hold, that it wasn't something that seemed right.
They were trying to figure out a way.
Right, and one of the things that came up at those hearings was the potential of alternates, but at the time, none of those alternates had been approved by the county. So it was interesting, but not particularly relevant. Mark Schiff has done great work with us, and we now know that there are alternates that are available. And so I think what we've been talking about, and I want to suggest we make a formal recommendation now, is that we basically reopen and do an RFP for someone to do a new study for us based on the alternative sewer systems being used. So rather than a single plan, sort of a version of what's about to happen on Job's Lane,
So who's doing that on Job's Lane? I mean, who's the actual
Private owner.
company?
which you have a right to do.
Okay, but who's installing the system?
No, it's any septic company, basically.
Any septic company?
Right, right.
Do they have a cost yet of doing that?
Well, they must, because they're doing it.
Well, that would be interesting.
So, and the 2 things I think.
That's only for their building.
Right.
I understand,
Once
but it
you-
would still be interesting.
Right, but it's a different, once you go above a certain gallonage per day, or I think it's like
I know.
10 or 15,000 gallons per day, it's a different,
It doesn't really solve the wet
it's a
usage.
different, procedure.
I understand, but I mean, just for information, especially if we're presenting things,
Right.
I think that would be a good side thing to
Right.
say. These guys
But
live.
when you do an individual system, even for a building, the threshold and the treatment required is not that high. But once you create a system that's, let's say, 10,000 gallons per day or 15,000 gallons per day, then at that point the threshold is a lot lower, and the health department requires a lot more treatment, a lot more monitoring, and the quality of the water is like maybe 3 or 4 times better.
So
The
it's-
system.
Okay.
So-
All right,
So
all
then,
right,
so
just-
wet use is something around 10,000 gallons a day, is what you, or,
Right, I think it's
Restaurant?
15,000 gallons. I think the
15?
threshold is up, yes,
okay. And, but a retail store, an
it
apartment
would be
is?
much less.
Much less.
Actually, so they have those systems that are for smaller systems that can be, but they don't treat as much as those.
Okay.
It's called Exhibit A or
Right.
Okay.
Right, so what we were looking at, as a possibility is basically, given the, it's very helpful, the way the village center is laid out, you have, generally groups of the buildings that all front on the same parking lot, and particularly around the central parking lot here. This is sort of a natural setup to say, do 2 or 3 or 4 around this lot, have the buildings hook in, lower everyone's cost, and then provide a lot more opportunity both for further growth, but more importantly, also for people to do wet uses where they make sense,
Where they have them, right?
Right, so, right.
Once you combine, once you have multiple owners that use the same system, you have to create a mini sewer district.
Right, right.
And somebody has to be,
It does have to be a district.
has to be a district, yes.
Right, so if you put 4 buildings together,
People
that
hate that
becomes a
word.
district.
Yeah, it's a little district, and they
I hate
tax
that
each
word. It
other.
means taxes.
Right. But the other side of it also is, to the extent you do, for example, something like that, you at the same time, if you're going to do that here, for example, in this central parking lot, you're going to do that's going to require a lot of physical disruption. Because the idea would be you can do it in the parking lot where we have a lot of land, and you don't impact the individual property owners. That's a really great opportunity to physically repair, replace, transform the central parking lot. And people talk about retail. That's what I do for a living. If I looked at this central parking lot, if I were a retailer, I would walk away and say I want to be somebody else, somewhere else. And I think that's happened a lot. I think it's one of the reasons East Hampton's been so healthy. They put a lot of public money into their parking lots. Their parking lots are phenomenal.
I know,
You
and
go
they're
in and
paid.
they're regulated and they're paved and they're
paid.
lit.
Yeah,
And you pay but not in the off season,
that's true.
right?
That's
So it's an
true.
incentive for parking for shopping in the off season.
And they are very well maintained.
They're incredibly well maintained. The comparison is pretty stark.
Right,
So it's also an opportunity for us to finally address that
yeah.
in the context of you're going to have disruption of the lot anyway.
And here in the Village Business District, there's an issue with the water table.
Right.
It's very high.
It is very
So
high.
with the advanced system, you can actually get closer to the water. or
Does
you
East
need the
Hampton
water.
have such an issue?
No, because their village business district is much further from the water, and it's actually higher. It's one of the higher spots in that
Really?
village.
Huh.
I mean, East Hampton as a whole doesn't have that issue as badly.
It's smaller too.
It's smaller, and also just East Hampton is we are much closer, and we're much more in the watershed. So basically, all the water coming down from North Sea, North Haven, all the drainage comes right through the village. It's all north-south in the East End, and we have much more development north of us. So our problems are, more significant than the other villages. I think
Well,
when
I'd like
Glynis had looked at that map, I think it was, or maybe MPV,
Yeah.
looked at the map of what area the village was in, a watershed area that was at risk. It was virtually the entire village.
I know. I remember that.
Yeah.
Well, I think we should make that
Right,
recommendation.
so, okay.
Do we vote on it?
Yep.
or- Yep.
So
I'll
to
vote
vote on a recommendation to the trustees to issue a new RFP for
Right,
alternative sewer systems for the village center.
yeah.
Aye?
Aye.
Anybody no? Yep, exactly. Yeah. Okay,
Wow,
right,
unified vote.
right.
I'm sure Eldon would vote yes.
Yeah, he would vote yes, and I'm sorry that our new environmental advisor isn't here, but it's one of the things that we talk
Yeah.
about
Okay, good.
as being very important. So those were my main two topics tonight.
Fine with me.
Okay.
I'm good. I just wanted to raise about workforce housing,
Yes.
affordable housing.
Yeah.
I know that there was some brouhaha from Watermill because they got reassessed. And there was some concern that with the reassessment and the raising of taxes, property taxes, that they were forcing out workforce and affordable housing.
Right.
And somebody said that in the news. And so, and then also I don't know how we do this, the auctioning of the houses at the Coast Guard opposite Kobreski Airport.
Right.
I mean, somebody's going to auction them off. I mean, can't somebody, I mean, is West Hampton in its own town, or is that,
Southampton is its own village.
it's its own village, but it's part of Southampton town, isn't it?
Right.
Gabreski is town.
Grabeski is town,
Yeah,
yeah.
I don't think the village goes all the way out there.
Okay, so, no, so if that's Southampton town, I think Southampton town ought to be looking at looking at that auction and finding out,
Right.
what we could do with that.
I mean, they did a great job in terms of development on Kobreski Airport.
Yeah.
It's really.
So, I mean,
nice.
those houses are great. They're great houses. So,
It's a good question.
so maybe I'll just
Right.
email Diana.
Right.
And they have a sewer plant right near there.
Yeah, is there?
Yeah, there's a sewer plant right
Well, I mean, the municipality should be part of that auction. I mean, hey.
Yeah, just to review, because not everyone was here last time, actually on either side. When we talked about the affordable housing last time, I thought two interesting things from that. One was that, there was a fund that was set up. There may make a lot of sense, just talking about what you had said at the meeting, to revive that fund and start having it applied again. And then the second, I think, is that, someone brought up, which was very, very true, the opportunities in the village center, but there are going to be other opportunities in the village in the next 10 years. And currently, we have no mechanism to get anywhere. So, for example, in Sag Harbor, you cannot do more than 2 units at a time without either paying into a fund
Right.
or building affordable on
Or
site.
building a unit.
Right.
Right, that's the way.
And so when they did the watch case, they ended up, originally they were going to do it on site, and then they ended up funding a very large amount of money
Yeah.
to allow affordable housing, and which has now been used by the village to build affordable housing units in Sag Harbor. We don't have any mechanism of that type, and it's something that I thought after the next meeting, sort of something we're going to want to start to think about, which is how much, because it's not, in many ways, one of the worst things is to do it after someone comes in with an application. In other words, it's much better
Yeah.
just using the
You have it.
hospital, for example, if there's a decision made
Right.
to require affordable housing as part of that program, either on-site or as a fund, better that they know before they issue an RFP, and then they can be taken into account rather than before. So those are two things I sort of got from that last meeting, that are tools that are at least available.
Well, the fund is in the code.
Right. And for example, North Sea Road, we've talked about North Sea Road a long time. There was talk about doing more retail. There was not a consensus on the commission to do that, and I think in the current economic context, it doesn't make a lot of sense. But their point, which is not a bad point, is we don't have the strongest office district out here. It seems to me inevitably at some point someone's going to look at those sites, particularly if we can solve the sewer issues,
Exactly.
and say, I want to do 20 units here. And again, we have no mechanisms to say, fine, 5 of them have to be affordable. There's no way to do that right now.
And,
Right.
You're a prime area for
Right.
economy.
Right. Again, you can walk into town, there's a bus line.
Walk to the train.
Right.
well, to reactivate this fund, do we have to make the recommendation to reactivate the
I
fund?
think it's something that we need to go back to the trustees, maybe in one of the comment periods during one of the public sessions, and begin to raise this as, how does everyone want to begin to now deal with this? Because I think the whole issue of workforce housing is becoming increasingly stark.
Well, I think we should have Diana Weir come into
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Because there's that, the
Right.
fund, and then there's also this 0.5% CPF that's
Right.
going to be on the ballot at some
Right.
point.
Right.
So, I mean, it's coming down the road.
That's a good
Right.
idea. Maybe we
Yeah.
should schedule this for the next few meetings.
Yeah,
Invite her to
something.
Talk to us.
Something. And ways to fund that fund,
Right,
which I think the trustees will have to come up with.
right, right. And I think it's also, part of the issue here, by the way, is the village, and I'm not saying I do either, the village doesn't have a agenda or that's not the right word, the village doesn't have a goal right now, which it probably needs, of what type of affordable housing does it want? You know, we talk about workforce affordable housing, I think each of us has a totally different vision of it. Some people think it's
It
a
is
family.
different.
Some people might think it's senior citizen. Some people might think it's starter housing. And each
Well, I
of those
think
is
it's all of
physically,
it. It's all
but
the
each of those are
above.
very different and differently funded and different. So
They have different guidelines maybe, but it all falls under affordable housing, I believe.
right,
At least statewide and federally.
right, but
It's governed by those guidelines.
The income.
Yeah.
right, but we don't. But let's again do another example. So, you know, some people look at affordable workforce housing, and their goal would be, you know, what would be really, I would say, the most modest part of the tier. Other towns, looking at on Long Island now, it's actually become very common on the North Shore, for example, in the villages. They're doing that, and then they're also doing what they would call lower middle income housing, because even those people are now priced out of the market. So the family that's making 50, 60,000 a year, you know, which in most of America would be perfectly fine. Here, you know, you cannot afford to any housing on the East End. So some of them have also now looked at that, which is sort of, again, defining what your affordable housing is. And I think that might be helpful because again, part of, I think the problem right now is people's vision of affordable housing, I think, is
It's
often
true.
that
It's
for
true.
someone who doesn't work or something, and that's really not.
Well, it's true. If
The
you're
case.
gonna have this fund in the code, then you've got to define what it is and what it's
Right.
for. And I
It could be
get it.
also in the form of tax abatement.
Right.
Yeah,
Right, I
get it.
mean, the
I get
town
it.
issue, you know, one of the things that, again, many villages have done is said, one of the ways we're going to make affordable housing possible is we're going to, you know, just use an example. So someone says on North Sea Road, because that's not defined, I have this site, I want to build 15 units. The village says, I want 3 of those units to be affordable. The builder says, I can afford to do. One of the ways many villages made it affordable is, fine, we'll actually exempt you from property taxes for 10 years.
If
To
you
make
do
it economically possible,
Right.
and it's worth it for the village because that's a lot less expensive than the village trying to figure out on its own how to build units,
Yeah.
right? So that, again, those are all ways that other villages on the island have begun to think about how do we make it possible. And we have a very healthy property
The
tax base.
Southampton Business Alliance has a nonprofit arm that does build affordable housing.
Right. I just would say anytime you're talking about building affordable housing on your own, as opposed to a builder as part of a project building it, it's always going to cost more.
Sure.
Right? And government tends to cost more
Sure it
than
is.
the private
Sure it is.
sector
I mean,
building. it,
yeah, sure.
Right? So to the extent that you can, I mean, private sector can't solve it,
No.
but at least it can help.
It can help.
You had a comment or question?
I was just
Sorry.
I was just curious that, you know, I like affordable housing, the idea, because I live here. I think, you know,
Right.
to have a village, you need at least some people living here around.
Right.
But does this village really have the appetite to do that? I mean, do the people that live here really want that? I mean, maybe there's some of the locals do, but I don't think the guy on Gin Lane really wants affordable housing in Southampton Village or other areas where these people are paying a lot of money for houses. Like, believe me, I'm all for it, because at some point, we're going to have to pay for our fire department and
Correct.
everything else. You know, we're not going to have any more volunteers left at the rate we're going. But I find it hard to believe that you'd have the appetite for that, and I think there'd be a lot of people in the background against it. You know?
Right, but maybe at this point, that's why we're looking into maybe a cooperation with the town and try to work together to see where else can we create affordable housing, which is right in the vicinity of the village, if we don't have the space.
And I agree with you. I
Exactly.
think before we do affordable housing, we need to get a consensus that this is what everyone wants and what they want. And I don't think that exists right now.
But now that's going to be public meetings and public,
Right.
I mean, that's going
Right.
to be all that.
Right.
I know, but nobody shows up because nobody knows.
Well, they do if you have a meeting in June.
There's 5,000 people here. and there's,
Nobody here.
You know, 3 people
July,
show up.
August.
You know? And I, listen.
By the
I
way,
think-
that's not the case. I'm not, I think you were there, but we had 52 people to one of our workshop meetings.
Yeah, we did. We had a
So-
lot of,
I know,
it's not
52
seasonal
people, mostly in the association. The rest of the people don't know. And
that was not true.
that's-
No.
We had
No, I
lawyers,
was
we had
one of those.
architects, we
Well,
had,
I'd say half
I don't
the
know,
people
Michael,
were
you can
the
do your due diligence and advertise it and let people
Right,
know, and then it's really on them, yeah?
I know, but they don't most people only buy a house once in their life. They don't understand zoning, nor do they want to
The
understand
people on
it.
Gin Lane buy a house once in their life?
No, the average person.
they buy 20 houses one time in their life.
Yeah, or they own 20 at once. But the average person really just buys 1 or 2 houses
That's
in their
true.
life.
That's
They don't
very
understand zoning because they'll go to the building department and say, I want to put a shed in. And they find out there's no room and they go crazy up there because they don't understand. They don't understand their rights and what's been taken away. And so that's why I've been against certain zoning. But, you know, I'm all for it, and the only way you can do this is by doing a sewer system, and I don't think you have to, at this point, put these little sewer systems in anymore, because you're gonna have to put them on village property anyway, because none of these buildings have any property. I think there's enough money in CPF, with Kimberly there fighting and getting the money that the village deserves to do these systems, where, I mean, we paid
It
enough to
certainly will help,
CPF.
you're right.
I mean, we've literally paid tens of millions, maybe hundreds of millions.
More like hundreds.
Yeah, we got a piece of land on Moses, that's what we got. And I think there's plenty of money for it right
Let me
now.
just correct those statistics
Okay.
with the real data.
Okay.
Southampton Village has poured in $160 million since 1999 when CPF began. It has received $40 million back. So you're correct, we've poured in a lot of money. We
And we're
haven't,
supposed to get back what we put in.
no, that unfortunately,
I thought that was the way it
no,
worked.
that was
No,
never
really not.
part of the intermunicipal agreement. It's not a put in, get back.
Right.
It was a put in, and then at the aggregate town level, see what is most favorable and beneficial, and that's how it was.
Right, and in fairness to the
Please
town,
represent
not that
me.
that's my job, but in fairness to the town, when CPF was created, the thought was, and it turned out to be the case, and they achieved it, there were vast tracts of land in north of the highway, in West Hampton, in Hampton Bays, in Flanders, that were critical from a water point of view, from an open space point of view, and that those could be acquired. It was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. But part of, I think, the reason why hopefully people will be more receptive now is most of those tracts are purchased. There's very little left of that type anymore. And there's some left, but not like there was.
I mean, the challenge we have,
Right.
and I don't want to,
Can we revise the
Digress.
rules?
pardon me?
Can
The
we
state
revise the
legislature.
rules?
That's a very good question.
It's the state
The answer
legislature.
is no.
Right, the
Well-
state legislature controls it, not us.
So, do we
But
just stop
having
there?
said that, you know, we have 14 properties that were acquired.
Right.
We're working closely with the CPF
Right.
team. We're working closely with the town. We have very good partnerships with the Conic Land
Right.
Trust and the
Yeah,
Nature
that's what I was just gonna
Conservancy,
mention.
and we're moving in the right direction.
And I think, Laura, your point before, what Kimberly has been able to do with the CPF fund, which is work with the town rather than against the town, is sort of what you're saying in affordable housing.
Yeah.
That we need to unite with the town rather than complain about it.
No,
So let's unite
absolutely.
and try to figure out together, how do we solve this, right? And
Right,
that's really what you're saying.
yeah.
And I think it's what's started to happen in the CPF. But sewers really are critical if we're going to do this. And look, they're not always. So for example, the hospital, interesting enough, has a sewer plant. So to the extent that the hospital moves and they redo that site, one of the reasons that site is going to be very attractive for people is there's an existing sewer plant with plenty of capacity for that site. It was over-designed for that
If they
site.
make it something like condos or apartments.
Right.
Kind of outdated that.
Right, very outdated, probably needs a little more investment, but at least it exists.
Yeah,
Right.
we had somebody look at it, the health department,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, it's ancient. well-maintained and ancient. So, okay? So we're back to a regular meeting schedule. Our next meeting is July 5th, I would just point out.
Oh,
So
yuck.
hopefully people will have recovered from their July 4th parties by then. We will, when we schedule a meeting with the Hillcrest neighborhood, we'll make sure everybody...
Could we invite the Hillcrest neighborhood to come here?
We can. I think the feeling was that they were more comfortable because of the history of what's happened, of at least for the first few meetings being there.
Well, we could just invite them by themselves, you know, I mean,
Yeah, I
not
think-
have an open meeting, but just
Yeah.
this is us, this is it, this
Yeah, and I
is
think we will
here.
do that, but I think at least the first few need
All
to.
right, okay.
I think people were
Well,
very
we should
appreciative.
issue that RFP.
Right.
Well, we should get them used to coming here, right,
Let's
Michael?
have an
You can't have
RFP
a
so we
forum
don't...
without it being public. You can't have a meeting without it being.
Right, of course.
Well, let's get this RFP
Yeah.
for...
This was a public meeting.
No,
I mean,
I'm saying, you're saying to have a meeting with just one group of people.
Yeah, you really can't do that according to the law, right? The open meetings law.
Well, it doesn't have to be, I mean, it doesn't have to be one of the regularly scheduled meetings,
Even so, you're not allowed to do it.
really?
Correct.
But we
Okay.
could just, all public meetings. we
Right,
can
yeah,
invite
no,
them.
and we will, but I think, just to the point that was made before,
Plenty of seats.
this is a neighborhood that traditionally has not been as comfortable doing that.
Well, they need to get comfortable.
And that will happen. That will happen.
Well, obviously, nobody's comfortable, is nobody.
Or they just love the job we're doing.
Right, exactly.
They complain, everybody complains.
I run my life, no news is good news.
Exactly, that's right, that's true. Okay, so that's the conclusion of the June meeting of the planning commission.
All right.